Gemini's using my own content to synthesize and then play back to somebody, like without a link. It's like this ogre just came in and is like front running me with my own content.
Well, the good news is Gemini sucks, because in my article today, I was joking about how I've posted on social media that my dog is my first employee. And when I put in my dog's name and my name on Google, the AI top result confirmed my dog was my first employee.
No way.
Based on my social media posts. Yes. So it's very easily gameable. It's not fully trustable. Google search used to be a huge source of traffic for traditional media companies. And I think that for us, the reality is this can be very different, where audiences are going to feel the direct affinity with us. They're going to be finding us maybe in other ways. But like the days of just Googling Intuit CFO interview and, oh, here's CJ, like we definitely can't assume that that'll be there.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to the Run the Numbers podcast. Today's guest is Alex Konrad, founder of Upstarts Media, a Substack that you should be reading, former senior editor at Forbes, where he spent more than a decade pulling back the curtain on tech's biggest names and stories. Alex helped create and run the Forbes 30 Under 30, the Cloud 100, and the Midas list, all staples of my early business diet. I used to actually grab those glossy issues in airport bookstores like they were investment prospectuses. We're going to get down into how those lists actually come together, how much is inbound versus hunting names down, and whether there's ever been a whisper of pay to play. He says no. We'll talk about profiling billionaires, interviewing Satya Nadella and Sam Altman, and yes, karaoke in Tokyo with Mark Benioff. Plus the meme that if you make one of these lists, you're a few years away from SEC trouble, and what it was like meeting folks like SBF, Elizabeth Holmes, and Martin Shkreli, you know who I'm talking about, before the headlines turned. We'll also dig into the business side of media, the dance behind fundraising announcements, how startups can actually work with journalists to shape perception, and the rise of VC firms like A16Z that operate more like media companies. And looking ahead, we'll talk AI, the death of SEO as you know it, and whether the last real moat for news is simply being first. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Most finance leaders still see travel as a cost center, something to manage, reduce, or delay until the numbers look better. But the Navan Business Travel Index, validated by NASDAQ, empowered by millions of corporate transactions captured through Navan's platform on how organizations are meeting and investing in face-to-face connections to fuel growth, tells a different story. Companies that are growing are moving. Business travel activity is up double digits year over year. International hotel spend is rising faster than domestic. Rideshare use is surging as teams compress more high-value meetings into fewer days. This isn't about perks. It's about pipeline, deal velocity, and customer retention. The CFOs winning right now aren't slashing travel, they're optimizing it. They know exactly where every dollar is going and the ROI it's delivering. The Navan BTI helps you see how your program stacks up against the market each quarter and where you might be leaving revenue on the table. Get the data, spot the gaps, turn your travel spend into a competitive edge. Download the latest Navan Business Travel Index today at navan.com/BTI. That's navan.com/BTI, and lead with the numbers that actually drive growth. Morgan Stanley recently said NetSuite is under the threat of disruption. That's right, NetSuite, the you never get fired for buying it software. So what's the threat? The answer, Rillet. Rillet is the AI native ERP modern finance teams are switching to because it's faster, simpler, and 100% built for how teams operate today. It doesn't take 12 months to implement, it doesn't feel like filing taxes to use, and your accounting team will actually love it. PostScript closes the books in only 3 days. Windsurf, bet you heard of them. They run finance with just 2 people. And Rillet is backed by Sequoia Capital. Yes, that's Sequoia. Unicorns like PostScript and Windsurf and hundreds of other companies have made the switch, and they're closing books in record time. If I were running a finance team today, I wouldn't default to legacy. I'd look at what's coming next, and Rillet is here. You don't want to be that guy at cocktail parties complaining about how bad his ERP is. Wait, am I the only guy who talks about ERPs around a keg? See how fast your team can move. Book a demo at rillet.com/metrics. That's RILLET.com/metrics. RILLET.com/metrics. As a CFO, you're expected to bring clarity to everything, including how your company manages ownership. The tools you use should make that easier, not harder. But when they come with hidden fees, data you can't always trust, and support you can't rely on, you end up with more frustration than clarity. That's where Pulley comes in. Pulley is the cap table management platform built for finance leaders who need accurate, decision-ready data from a system that works for your business, not against it. With Pulley, you get intuitive workflows, audit-ready reporting, and support you can count on, all backed by predictable pricing you can plan around, so you can stay compliant and make smarter decisions about your company's future. Manage everything from fundraise modeling to ASC 718 reporting to custom liquidity programs, all on one trusted platform. Hundreds of high-growth companies like Linear, Fathom, and Runway trust Pulley to help turn ownership into a strategic advantage. And joining them is now easier than ever. You can switch to Pulley in as little as 5 days. And for a limited time, they're offering 25% off your first year. To claim your exclusive offer, visit pulley.com/mostlymetrics. That is PULLEY.com/mostlymetrics. Pulley.com/mostlymetrics. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, CJ.
I'm pumped to have you here because I've been reading Upstarts since you launched it. And as like a fellow writer, it's like this weird thing to experience from the other side where you start to like feel like you know a person because like you read all their stuff. But I assume you've been getting that for like years and years now because of your time at Forbes and elsewhere.
To a degree, but I've had to reintroduce myself to folks. Like, I'll go to events now or meet people and I'll introduce myself and they'll sort of be like, oh, what's Upstarts? And I'm like, I was at Forbes for 12 years. And they're like, oh, I read your work there. So I've been humbled that it's definitely a work in progress. Some people know my name. Some people know my past work. Increasingly, hopefully people know Upstarts too.
I love it. Well, I want to go back in time for a bit. And if you'll humor me, like the Forbes 30 under 30, the Cloud 100, and the Midas list, I used to buy these every year in airports and I would get on the flight. And I remember this one specific one that I think it was at PwC at the time, and Palmer Luckey was on the cover. And I remember thinking like, if I could ever get in the Forbes 30 under 30. And then I kept getting older and older and started to realize I wasn't going to make it. And then I think I started to resent it a little bit because I wasn't on the list. But take us behind the curtains. What was it like building those lists?
Yeah, well, for the record, I'm 36 and I never made the list. So
there
you go. I did write it a few times, but it's a big project. Forbes made the decision to have a bunch of different lists by category. I actually started my career at Fortune magazine, where one of the first projects I worked on as an intern was the 40 under 40 there. And that was even harder to me because it was like, how do we evaluate Serena Williams versus, a tech founder, right? Like they're very different. And so when I got to Forbes, I helped sort of create the venture capital under 30 list. And at least it was like, we're going to be evaluating 30 young VCs against each other. Now, there's a question of like, should there be so many lists? Do we need 20 or whatever, under 30 lists? But I do think that it starts from a place of at least trying to recognize folks who have had accomplishment in their 20s within their fields. And I do think that, under 30 has become a bit of a meme and gotten a bit of a bad rap online because, it's easy, it's fun, it's a pile on. And if you earn an award or achievement, it's a lot cooler to like downplay it after, right? Like it's not cool to be like, oh, I made this list. So I do think we hear like more from the people who are salty than the ones who actually like got value but don't want to be cringe,
Did the sub lists expand over time to have other categories?
They did. So I created the venture capitalist around 2014, 2015. Our first call out was Sam Altman, actually.
Wow.
He was at running YC at the time. And we had enterprise tech, consumer tech, a bunch of other areas like, research or, for social progress. And then I think over the years, those lists have kind of evolved. Like, there's an AI list. Maybe you don't need a consumer tech list anymore. Like there's, because consumer is in a bunch of different things. So like Forbes has sort of tweaked those lists over the years. And then staffers have always been the editors who kind of work with outside judges to help determine the list. And that's another thing I want to make clear is that we didn't pick the list ourselves. We would be kind of conduits to have industry judges who would rotate actually vote on the folks.
I did not know that. I assumed that it was everybody from Forbes wearing like these Illuminati cloaks, like in the back room.
Oh my gosh, I wish. And people are always like, oh, was it pay for play? I wish I'd gotten money because I certainly made no dollars from the headache of 30 under 30. But no, I mean, there were folks like Gary Tan, Alexis Ohanian, folks from Andreessen Horowitz. A lot of leading VCs were my judges over the years, and they would always rotate and be announced after the fact. So you couldn't blow up their phones and annoy them to try to make it.
How much of it was like inbound? Because I assume once a list kind of takes on a life of its own, everybody is trying to like submit themselves.
Yeah, I think a challenge with a list like that is you want it to be inclusive. And so you want to have an inbound where anyone can submit. And then at the same time, you have kind of warm intros or folks coming in from referrals who think that they're getting a leg up. Like from my standpoint, I was always looking for folks who were a little sort of diamonds in the rough, or maybe they were emerging managers who weren't in Silicon Valley or New York. And so those inbound cold applications mattered a lot to me. But I think that, there was also adverse selection where we would have someone make the list from Stanford's Graduate School of Business, and they had their entire class spam Forbes staff recommending them. And then they actually made it in spite of that, not because of it, because we thought that was super annoying. And then, of course, what they would tell the Stanford class is like, oh, the way to make the list is have 40 people nominate you. And it's like, once that kind of narrative takes hold, it's very hard to combat. But I was always like, please don't email me. Please don't have everyone in your life recommend you, because that's not really going to make a difference. And I don't think it's a meritocratic process. And we did, like, if we're going to work on these things, we wanted them to be good. No one wants to work on bad stuff.
Yeah. They did become memeable at one point. And I do think it was people being a bit salty about it. There became a joke that like, if there's like the Curse of the Madden cover, if you've heard of that, like with video games, that like who was on the cover when you're like LaDainian Tomlinson tore like his ACL the next year, and it was just a whole bunch of players. And then it was the meme that like if you're on the Forbes cover, then eventually like you're gonna run into trouble with the SEC or something. I imagine that was a funny thing to optically manage internally. Well,
for years I was pushing us to like lean into it, do like the list 30 under 30 criminals, like, own the meme, because the best way to handle people laughing at you is to laugh at yourself. It kind of like be part of the joke. And so I very much felt that way with 30 under 30, because look, thousands of people are alumni of that list at this point. Almost all the big names in tech, like if they started their thing while they were in their 20s, they were considered, so you just don't hear about those people. Like the Collison brothers are not associated with 30 under 30 because they've had a lot of other achievements. So it's one of those things where you can't win, because like even if a small percentage of folks do like go to jail, that's all it takes, right? Like no one cares about the statistical significance, and I think that's totally understandable. It's human nature. So I was like, lean in, have fun with it. Like I even said when I left Forbes, like, I marked myself safe from not going to prison for working on the project. So
it's a great like media tip that you just gave there to lean into stuff. Who does a really good job is if you've ever followed the Twitter account for Ryanair or for Spirit Airlines, they lean into it.
You know who else leans into it? Brian Johnson, the sleep guy, or like, who calls himself the fittest man in the world. You know, he's very controversial. I saw him give a talk a few weeks ago, and he basically was like, I have stopped fighting with trolls on Twitter. If people like say that I'm weird or running a cult or whatever, I yes and them back. And it just becomes a much more fun conversation than just yelling at people. And I was like, good for that guy, because certainly a lot of people think what he's doing is weird, and he seems very at peace with that.
I saw him reply to somebody. They're like, you drink like the blood of like young men or something. And he did like yes and them. And it was actually pretty hilarious that he leaned into it.
Yeah, so people should follow him to get tips on I guess, deflection or non-confrontation.
I guess tactically, as someone who writes for a living, why do lists work so well? Because if I remember right, I think Jason Calacanis, when he was starting out, didn't he do like the Silicon Alley or something like that? And that was a list?
Yeah, Jason has worked on them. Most media OG folks have been part of lists, either making them, judging them. Like, let's not forget, it's maybe not doesn't have the same cachet now, but TechCrunch Disrupt, the pitch competitions, like all these things were a big deal. TechCrunch even did like a Razzies award that was controversial early in my career because I think they like pissed off Travis Kalanick when he was at Uber. But like all these awards were like a big thing. I think that one, it plays to human nature that folks want to be recognized. They want to feel some sort of celebration, and especially founders. Like I feel this now with upstarts. It's very hard to stop and like celebrate anything. You just think about all the stuff you have yet to accomplish. I'm sure to some degree, you probably feel this too with what you've been building. And so to have like a moment to just be like, oh, I actually did something, I think does tap into our human endorphins. And then I also think that, there's hate reading or like, the FOMO factor where, people will complain about, let's say, a VC list. And yet you're like, everyone read that list. They might say they hate it, but the traffic shows that it got a lot of attention. And so, I don't know, lists just seem to tap into our human instincts in a way that makes media brands make money. And so they keep doing it. So many people have told me upstarts should launch a list already. And I'm like, I'm not sure. But there's attractive reasons why you would.
That was my next question. Like, I feel you're primed to start the next list. I mean, you know how the sausage is made.
Well, I created Cloud 100 in 2016, I want to say, with Byron Dieter at Bessemer. And it was awesome for that to become like a real franchise that cloud companies really respected. And I got to, the best thing for me was I got to meet some of the most impressive entrepreneurs that I now know through that process, like Melanie Perkins at Canva. I met when Canva was still a pretty small startup. I got to do a cover story on her later, go to Australia, super fun. I think she's a great leader. And so that kind of process was really good for me. But then at some point with Cloud 100, I was like, oh my gosh, I've created a monster. People take this thing so seriously. You have to feed the beast. All these VC firms have launched their own enterprise or cloud lists. And then it's like, what does cloud even mean anymore? We have Ramp and Brex and companies you wouldn't think of first as a cloud company, suddenly eligible for that kind of list. And so I don't know, I think lists kind of have a half-life, and they also can sort of take on, they can outlive their purpose, but they can have a lot of value. For me with upstarts, it's like there's a lot of revenue potential with a list, but I'd want it to actually be useful for the ecosystem. My biggest concern is that I would just do something because it seemed financially smart. Yeah. And then my audience is like, Alex, that's not what we signed up for. That's not what we're rooting for,
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Listen, being a CFO, it's not always that glamorous. Sometimes I find myself watering the plants and taking out the garbage in the office. And, the best CFOs I know they're true business leaders. They know how to drive growth in heroic fashion. Unfortunately, the status quo of finance makes that really hard because day to day, we're mostly up to our eyeballs in spreadsheets and receipts. Thankfully, there's a financial provider who has built a solution to match your ambition, Brex. Brex designed a modern corporate card and spend platform that controls spend proactively and automates tedious expense and accounting tasks. Brex frees up CFOs to focus on the high-impact projects that drive growth. The shit that's actually worth your CFO time. So how does Brex work? You can embed your expense policy inside the corporate card to prevent out-of-policy spend before it happens. Receipts and memos are auto-generated, so you always have what you need to close the books fast. Managers get freed up from reviewing, every possible expense under the sun because in-policy expenses are auto-approved, and AI will flag any exceptions. And all the while, your expense detail is syncing with your ERP because Brex integrates with almost all of them. I love that, from QuickBooks to NetSuite. It's your time to shine as the strategic growth driver you are, and Brex can make it easy. More than 30,000 companies like DoorDash, Coinbase, and SeatGeek use Brex to make every dollar and every minute count. Join them at brex.com/metrics. That's brex.com/metrics. So if you listen to this podcast, you'll know that I am incredibly passionate about the FP&A space because that's the route I went to get to CFO. And I want to tell you about a tool that has exploded over the past few years. It's called Aleph. And I remember getting outbounded by them about 2.5 years ago, and I actually took the bait because they claimed to be able to do a demo with my live data, with me right there on the call. And so I had to see it to believe it. And it was the founder running demos back then. Shout out Albert, hope you're listening. And he connected my NetSuite and built my P&L using their Excel add-in in like 15 minutes. And I was really impressed. Since then, Aleph has gone on to raise money from some of the top VCs out there, and they've built an impressive roster of customers. Many of their customers have been on the podcast, like the CFO at Turo, 8 Sleep, and Zapier. They're all really big champions and supporters of Aleph like me. But it's not just an Excel add-in. Aleph also allows finance teams to work with their live cross-system data using Google Sheets and their web app. And that's cool because it gives teams the option to support a wide range of needs and workflows like budgeting, forecasting, and variance analysis. And speaking of variance analysis, they're doing some really cool things with AI-powered variance analysis. It basically allows you to figure out what's going on and why, and it takes the time that you'd usually spend from hours to minutes. It's really cool. So I highly recommend checking them out and taking them up on that demo or trial, just like I did back in the day. And you can learn more and get started at getaleph.com/run. That is getaleph.com, aleph.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you. All right, I got to get up on my soapbox for a sec here. Everybody's talking about AI powered this and automated that. But here's the thing about revenue recognition. It's not just about moving data around. It's about getting it right, full stop. So RightRev is laser focused on one thing, RevRec that auditors actually trust. See, there's a difference between automating revenue processes and automating revenue recognition correctly. RightRev was actually built by the godfather of RevRec, who understands ASC 606 compliance, audit controls, data validation, and the flexibility needed for complex B2B contracts. We're not trying to be your billing system or your ERP. We're the revenue recognition engine that sits between your contracts and your financials and making sure every dollar is recognized correctly, on time, every time. Companies like Snowflake and Logic Monitor don't just need fast revenue reporting, they need revenue reporting that's audit ready from day one. And that's honestly where RightRev shines. And what I love about RightRev is they're not out there trying to be everything to everyone and just slap some, AI slop on top of it. While everyone is building these massive platforms that do everything in a kind of mediocre fashion, RightRev does one thing exceptionally well. They make sure your revenue recognition is bulletproof. Ready to stop gambling with your RevRec? Visit RightRev.com to see how we make complex revenue simple. That's RightRev.com, where revenue recognition actually works. What's that Groucho Marx quote? I don't want to be a part of a club that wants me as a member. Like there is an exclusivity factor to it.
There is. And I think I would be open to doing a list that felt like it was addressing something underserved in the ecosystem. So if there was like a cohort of people, maybe not CEOs or founders, but if there were a cohort of people or types of companies that were not getting attention, and I could like shine a light on them or help them tell their stories in a way that felt good for the community, and maybe it had revenue potential, that's where it becomes more exciting to me. Just knocking off the Midas list would not be super intellectually fun.
Yeah, there is something to be said, though, about making your stuff instantly shareable. Like this podcast, the number one growth driver is the guests who come on sharing it on LinkedIn after, because inevitably they have a lot of kick-ass connections who are in the same field, who are CFOs, who are VCs, who are in the media business. And then they share it and like lists automatically. Like if you have a list of 100 people, you're basically priming it for 100 people to share it.
You're totally right. The analogy I've given people in the past is, like high school theater plays, they would cast like 20 kids in the class in the show, so that's 20 sets of parents and others who would come. So, hey, you have an audience.
It's an easy way to fill the room. There's so many lessons in here for maybe even how you fill dinners. I want to talk about interacting with billionaires over the years, because you've profiled some high-profile folks like Satya Nadella, Sam Altman. I think you actually went to like a karaoke bar with Mark Benioff. Is that real?
That was a weird story. Yeah, one of my first cover stories was Mark Benioff, the first year that we did Cloud 100, or maybe second year, but early on, almost 10 years ago now. And I went to San Francisco to meet with him, New York to meet with him, and then I went to Salesforce's corporate offsite in Hawaii, which was, an experience. And it was kind of the OG days of AI within Salesforce. They were debuting Einstein. If any of the CFOs or others listening have trauma or like a trigger about Salesforce Einstein.
Einstein and IBM's Watson, neither. I feel like it was like right idea, wrong time.
100%. I saw a funny joke that was like OpenAI is acquiring IBM Watson for $200 million. Or no, it was Meta. Yeah. Like, the meme of Meta taking talent from OpenAI. Yeah. But anyway, Watson. But with the Benioff thing, I'm in Hawaii or whatever. And he's like, well, next stop for me on my global tour is the Salesforce office in Japan. And he kind of dared me to go. And the nice thing about Forbes was we did have a travel budget, and I was able to tell the head of Forbes, we got kind of dared to follow Benioff to Tokyo. That might be interesting for the story. So they flew me back to New York and then middle seat economy, New York to Tokyo for 48 hours. So it was definitely a challenge, but I got to see how Benioff interacted with local business leaders in Japan. All the top leaders kind of came out for him. And then we sang karaoke with the CEO of Rakuten, which was the most bizarre experience of my life. Yeah.
Are these people like tethered to the reality like the rest of us, or is it they're like this reality distortion field? What's it like?
It's like sometimes they feel normal, and then Rakuten, which for folks who don't know is this big e-commerce company, kind of the Amazon of Japan, has a karaoke bar in its headquarters. Just so that the CEO can like privately sing karaoke with other execs. And you're like, who came up with that? And it's like, so it feels normal until it doesn't. Like, I wrote a lot about WeWork over the years, and Adam Newman had all this charisma and could really own a room. And then he would do something like buy a startup that makes wave machines for surfing so that anyone could surf. And you're like, how does that make sense for WeWork? And it was like, there would always be that point where you're just like, okay, now we're in bizarre territory.
Yeah, I got to imagine hanging out with these people. There are moments where you're like, this makes no sense. Like a normal person wouldn't spend money on that or react to it in this way. But then like there are probably humanizing moments too, where like, I don't know, they're holding a screaming baby or they're answering like a text from their wife.
100%. I was part of the Forbes team that wrote a story about Microsoft's turnaround with Satya, and going out to Redmond and seeing how Satya works with his team and how being a dad of a child with special needs had made him think about things like accessibility at Microsoft. And I think give him this baseline of empathy. That really was eye-opening for me. Because I do think even with these billionaires, you have a sick kid or you have, tragedy in your family, that affects people across the economic spectrum. And I think like how you see people's humanity can be reassuring or refreshing as well. It's not like you're just always a court jester in the palace of billionaires being like, this is bizarre, which to be clear, if I went to the Bezos wedding in Venice recently, I would have probably felt that way, but I wasn't invited, so it's okay. But yeah, you see the full spectrum where folks are a lot more similar than you think in some ways. And then they do have maybe certain assumptions about how people live that are not what we would consider normal. So yeah.
I'm certainly more outgoing, like if I'm hosting a dinner or if I'm like doing a podcast. Like we were talking like right before this, and I try to like, it's not an act or anything, but like my voice does elevate, and like I try to be more outgoing, have more energy for these types of things. I imagine like a billionaire, I wonder if these guys are like always on, or if it's like then you start to talk to them in the back room and it's like, okay, like it drops a little bit and they're more level in kind of their energy and their interactions. Because I've seen interviews with like Mark Benioff, and that guy, it's like you'd run through a wall for that guy.
I think that a lot of the best business leaders that I've met, or the most successful billionaires, don't have great work-life balance in the sense that they are always on in some way. They surround themselves with friends who are really successful in other fields. Like, Benioff is friends with Lars Ulrich from Metallica, and he's friends with like the best surgeon in America, and he's friends with like a famous classical music composer from Japan. Like he surrounds himself with other excellent people. And I think that even if he's doing something like singing karaoke, he's still kind of on in the sense that he's rubbing shoulders with other kind of type A people. Melanie at Canva, like I feel like is someone who's just always thinking about Canva's ambition. I think Ryan Peterson at Flexport is always thinking about Flexport's place in the world. These folks they're almost like sickos in a good way, where they just like can't turn off their brains about what they're doing. And I do think that is a superpower. It can also make you maybe like a difficult person to be close friends with. They're never my close friends, so I don't have to deal with that part.
Yeah, they're obsessed. I like how you said it. It's like you're kind of sick in the head that you just keep running at this thing just nonstop.
Which I'm sure with your podcast, with your newsletter, like I feel this, with a tiny company like Upstarts. Like I had a dream about the article I was publishing today overnight. And then the dream actually helped me change something in the story this morning, which is like, is that normal? Maybe not, but I think it's kind of funny, you know?
Oh yeah, it's somebody said, "Oh, well, you work for yourself now. That must be nice. Like you can take a day off whenever you want, but like it's like the old adage of like if you work for yourself, you never work a day, but you also never get a day off." And I feel that's so true. Like I'm always thinking about it.
Do you take vacation? I'm dealing with this. I'm not sure. Like I'm supposed to go on a week-long cruise later this summer, and I'm like, do I schedule posts? Am I allowed to take a week off? Like, what is even the norm here? You know?
I schedule a ton of stuff, but I work 7 days a week in a way that fits my schedule. So I have two young kids, and I find it's more about like work life integration. And I don't mind opening up my computer like on a Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. while like the kids are napping or something, because it's like my thing that I'm building and I enjoy doing it. My energy is naturally drawn there. But it would be different if I was working for someone else. But I tried to actually go through this in my head recently, and I don't know if you've done it since going full time. It's like, am I working more hours now, or am I working more hours before when I was a CFO and also trying to write and podcasts on the side? And what I came to is I'm at my desk less, but I think I'm always constantly thinking about it. And there's like a difference between like being in your business and on your business. And I think I'm just like always 24/7 on my business.
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about it is sort of like focus or purposeful work versus busy work. And I think that when you're running your own small business, or, you know, I call myself a startup, but we're bootstrapped and I haven't hired people yet. I hope to eventually. But, you know, when it's just me, everything I'm doing is advancing the business in some way, whether it's brainstorming or meeting with a potential, you know, partner, all that stuff. And so for me, it's just juggling the different things, but they're all with that sense of direction. Whereas I think when you're even like a star employee, at some point you can unplug. Like that's kind of what you sign up for, being part of a team, right? And here we are talking, you know, at the beginning of the summer. I'm sure a lot of folks we know who are even type A high achieving people are like, oh, I can take off around July 4th. Like maybe I can phone it in on July 3rd. No one's going to really care at a big company. Not really the same for us, right? Like it's like, if you do that, you pay for it on the other end. You know, you're working on the 5th, you know, on Saturday. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, like July 4th is this Friday, and my wife was like, "You're taking that day off." And I'm like, I'll block off hours, but like I don't really take off days anymore. It's just kind of like it's more of like I said, work-life integration. It's just like a way of existing at this point.
But I agree. But I think if you're building towards something and you own it, it doesn't feel like a chore. It is just about prioritization, as you said. You know, if I want to go to the beach with my wife and my 92-year-old grandma on Friday, that's great. I'll just make up that time, as you said, like Saturday afternoon or Sunday night or something. It just always has to get done. And I think that is one thing that I don't actually miss, but like in the darker moments, I'm a little like wistful of, like I pretend that I miss, which is the idea that you could just like do busy work for a day or phone it in, or like, you know, just turn off your brain a little while you're working. I feel like I can't really do that.
I do feel like I take advantage though of the more meaningful moments now. Like every night I have dinner with my family at like 5. Kids get hungry really early, so we have dinner at like 5:30, like at the latest. And if I have to log back on from like 9 to 11 or something, I'm doing it under my own will to do so. But it's like pretty cool. Like a lot of days I would not be home for dinner in the past, or I would be traveling, or like if I want to pick my daughter up from school and take her to karate one day, I can do that. I'll just make it up over the weekend. So it gives you a different type of optionality.
I completely agree. I have a friend who's an exec at a top tech company, and he and his wife basically never eat dinner together because he works late, and that works for them. For me, I would rather have dinner most nights, at least every night that I'm home, with my wife. And then if I have to work till 1 or 2 in the morning, I'll take that trade to have the FaceTime with my family.
What else have you learned about yourself since going all in? Is there anything that either you added to your plate that you wish you could have done before, or anything that you got to eliminate that was like a pet peeve but you had to do because there's a construct of the media companies you're at?
You know what's funny? I've spent my whole career writing about technology and thousands of startups, right? And I always thought that the worst job in the world that I could never ever imagine doing was sales. I was like, these puppies have to just have short-term memory, just be relentlessly positive, get told no all the time, and then like get all excited about a win, that they are under pressure to make a quota for, right? And to me, it just seemed like this horrible hamster wheel that I was like, I could not imagine doing that. Now, big surprise, as a small business, a lot of my job is sales. And it turns out I'm A, not that bad at it, pretty good at it. And B, you do kind of like get the high from the wins and get the calluses to be okay with the no's in a way that I don't think I could really appreciate until I had to do it myself. So that was a huge shock for me.
Dude, like when I started, well, actually the first sales experience I had is me and my wife were trying to start a marketplace in the tourism sector. It was last minute tours and activities. And I remember we were walking up and down like docks in the middle of summer in like Tampa, Florida, trying to sign up like people that operated dolphin whale watches, that type of stuff.
Wow.
Jet ski rides and stuff. And like getting told no and to like screw off by like someone with like calloused hands and like oil all over their shirt. Like that was, and it's in person too. It's not like they just hung up on you. Like that really, I'd say it prepared me for doing sales in this role, but I don't think I fully ever got over it.
I hear you. I'm still for me, my equivalent is I'm very competitive. And when someone has an amazing story or a big win that like theoretically I could have had, I've had to reprogram my brain to just not take that competitively or personally and have a positive sum mindset where I'm like, look, I'm publishing 8-10 times a month. I'm not going to get to most stories. There's plenty of good stories for everyone, but there is a little bit of a twinge. Like, I think when Meta's hiring list of OpenAI folks they'd poached came out earlier, and Wired, I think, wrote the story. A friend of mine there, Kylie Robeson, like 80% of my brain was like, amazing for Kylie. She's going viral. This is a huge get for her. And then there was like the small lizard brain that was like, why didn't you have that, Alex? Like you should have done that. And I've had to really push that down and not think that I should have every possible good story, There is something about like a really good get. Like by the time this comes out, I'll have had my interview with the CFO of Intuit on. And like that was like my great white whale, because it's like $225 billion market cap company, largest in the ERP category. Like I really wanted to interview him. And there's something about like feeling that win. And me and my wife right now are watching this documentary on Barbara Walters, who's done like some of the best interviews in the world. And there's this moment where like it's an inflection point in her career where she's racing to interview the president of Egypt and the president of Israel, I believe. And then Walter Cronkite, who's the male interviewer, is also racing to get there. And she gets the interview before he does. And like that was like a huge turning point in her career and like a victory. I mean, sounds like I should watch this thing, although it'll give me PTSD as well, because, now I'm competing against 8-10 person teams that places like the information for certain stories. And I'm just not going to win most of the time. But the nice thing is a lot of the stories I'm trying to do for upstarts are only stories that upstarts would want to do or have the right to do. And that's one sort of solution for me, is that like my own weird flavor of things is unique, so maybe I wouldn't get the president of Egypt, but I'd find the country that nobody else wanted to interview because it was the startup country. This podcast is apparently number 2 business management in Zambia. So if you're looking for a hookup there, let me know. Hell yeah. CFOs in Zambia. I hope you become upstarts readers. But like fundraising announcements are the lifeblood of tech media, something that you've lived for a while. What does that dance look like behind the scenes? Yeah, so I try to have a balance of stories that come in from pitches or sort of the inbound, and then stories that are my own idea and outbound. I think you need a healthy mix of both to have a good grasp on what's happening in the startup ecosystem and also a good experience for the audience. And for me, my customer is always the reader, and especially readers who work at startups. Maybe they're founders of startups as my ICP. So when I think about that, if I only did pitch like funding announcements or launches, that would be kind of like a press release arm, and it would not be super exciting for that audience, right? Like you would stop feeling like it's special that I wrote about one. So I think for me, the perfect cadence is a couple funding exclusives a month, maybe a couple launches from Stealth that just are really interesting to me. They maybe have interesting revenue or a founder story something about the technology that stood out to me, but you're kind of trusting my curation and my taste that this is worth, at least my hope, like that Alex is betting that this is worth your time, and that you always feel like I'm doing my best to deliver on that. And then with the rest of my time to get your attention in the week, I want to hit you up with analysis, scoops, other types of stories too, that companies would not necessarily want to be like pitching out as marketing. I think a big failure for upstarts would be if we were just like a new distribution or marketing channel for companies to say the same stuff they were going to say anyway.
Yeah. The TechCrunch fire hose, I've never truly understood that. Like people approaching them to then just basically say the exact same thing that was going to come out in a press release elsewhere.
Well, it's, there's different reasons to talk to press. I think one thing that I tell founders all the time is that, the best stories are often not about the best companies. And just because you have a really good company doesn't mean you yet have a good story from a reporting standpoint.
So true.
And if you're successful enough, the coverage, the attention will come over time, right? We've seen this time and again where some of the buzziest names now to get an interview with were pretty hard to see coverage of earlier in their career. Like Vlad Tenev now from Robinhood is like the guy. But, for the first couple of years of Robinhood, it was just another fintech. We hadn't had the whole GameStopification where they became a meme. And so I think, why are people going to TechCrunch or other places? I hope that they're working backwards if you're a founder and thinking, this is what the article will get me. This is the outcome we want, whether it's hiring people, finding new investors, finding new customers. And then they're talking to the publication or the creator or influencer who helps fit that need. So if you're like, honestly, there's no good reason to talk to upstarts. We wanted to talk to Bloomberg, but they said no. And you're like the next best thing. That's not going to be exciting for me, right? But if you're like, we love Upstarts' brand focused on startups, you're a challenger, we're a challenger, we want to bet on you as well. Like that'll be much more exciting for me. And then if you want to talk to Bloomberg, God bless. I think like having the right like sort of platform market fit or like publication market fit is really important. Yeah.
Well, to piggyback on that, when I started writing, it took me like 2 years to get this off the ground. Where like nobody listened to me because I think I was trying to write from the lens of like this fictional smart person that I thought was out there. And then I found audience market fit once I started writing about what was just interesting to me and in the way that was natural for me to talk and write. And I think what I'm hearing from you, to play it back, is like you look at it through your own lens of like, would Alex find this interesting? Because if not, you probably shouldn't do it.
If Alex doesn't find it interesting, his readers won't. And there's a good chance that I'll still get it wrong and I'll think something is interesting, but not all my readers will like it. The reality is I can't write something for everyone at once. I recently just published a story, a deep dive into pet tech, because I felt like I was doing a lot about AI companies. And while a lot of my readers care about AI, they probably don't want all AI all the time, or at least not everybody does. And so moving around in the startup ecosystem is important for me. And I just have to remember that, different flavors for different folks.
Outside of funding rounds, though, what's the best way for companies and operators to like capitalize on a media opportunity? Because like these funding events, it's like you brought a bunch of cash, but like that shouldn't be the only compelling event where we get to talk about you.
100%. The reason funding, I think, became such a proxy is because companies can't always give their revenue. They can't always give their biggest contracts. Like I would love for the execs, who are listening in or watching, I would love them to share all their numbers, but that's just not the reality usually. And so funding rounds became a proxy where, hey, if I have a high valuation or I raised a lot of money from an investor who's known, this is a sign that we are growing healthily, that we are maybe bigger than you think, right? And so it kind of just became the badge of honor there. But I don't think for reporters, it's the most exciting thing necessarily either. As you said, it's a moment in time. It's fun. It's funding to actually go do something. The funding itself is not the end goal, or at least it shouldn't be. And so I think, what I've tried to do is look at things like revenue milestones, new product launches, or even just kind of zeitgeist moments where it feels like people are talking about or debating something and this company is well equipped to address it. And that's how I kind of have approached my coverage. So I definitely think that it's easy as a founder to feel frustrated, like, oh, unless I have a huge funding round, nobody's going to pay attention. But I think you just have to be more creative.
I also find it way more fascinating to talk about a company that went through something or is evolving. Like, to me, I don't want to see just the highlight reels. Like, I know that it's hard work to build something enduring. Like, I want to learn about, it makes you more humanizing too. Like, if you talk about your failures.
100%. I think that no one wants to hear someone brag endlessly. If you meet up with some friends you haven't seen for a while and one just talks relentlessly about how great their life is, everyone else gets turned off, right? They want to hear the challenges. They want the real talk. And I think the challenge is just we are in a world where folks want to brag on social media. They're fighting for the perceived attention of success, and they're scared to show weakness or talk about challenges because maybe that just becomes a soundbite or the focus in a way that makes them look weak or something. And I think that's unfortunate. I agree with you that often the stories that have gotten the most feedback in my career were ones where someone went through a pivot or a turnaround or their company went through a near-death experience, because that was so much more relatable and tactically helpful. When I talk to founders at events now, I'm always trying to get really specific advice or war stories that other founders would find valuable. Someone just being like, hang in there and follow your passion is really not gonna help someone in their day-to-day.
Are there any oh shit moments that founders have shared with you and the story resonated well with the audience?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've spoken to startups that felt like, they had several weeks to pivot, or they were going to run out of funding. And I've spoken to companies where their first launch, didn't work and they had to shift gears. One example is Gamma, which is AI created slides, like, presentations.
Oh yeah.
They have reached 50 million in ARR with a team of under 30 people. They are doing really well with sort of what now looks like this rocket ship product-led growth. But at first, like, the product was really struggling and they were like, should we return money to investors? Like, should we?
They were at that point.
Yeah. And I think, being honest about that journey is so much more helpful. And so that was a really fun profile for me to do. Actually, a lot of my favorite articles, whether it was about Figma or Granola or a bunch of these products, there's sort of those 10-year overnight successes where it's as interesting to hear about what happened before momentum really built as it is kind of what happened when they got all the momentum.
Can you zoom in on Granola for a second? Because I really like that story that you wrote.
Yeah, Granola was the first profile we did for Upstarts in April. Yeah. Basically, I found the product because people were recommending I use it for building my company. I was going to do these 25 audience calls to hear what people wanted to have me write about, like what news they thought was needed in the ecosystem. And everyone was like, oh, you should try Granola. So I started using it and it was really helpful. It's basically AI note-taking, but it's very light touch. You basically just let it run in the background and it generates bullet points of your AI notes, but you can also take your own notes and you can look at the transcript. And for whatever reason, it just connected with me more than some of the other tools that felt more heavy-handed to me. And so I cold emailed the CEO and was like, can I interview you? He said, sure. And it was really fun to just go into like how they thought about building their product, how they did sort of, capture this moment. And it's obviously a very competitive market that they're in. We've seen a lot of AI note takers. So to think about how, like, hear about how Chris, the CEO, thinks about competition, building, super fun. I actually did an event in London in June where I had a breakfast for like 80 founders and people in the startup ecosystem there. And Chris and I went even deeper on sort of how they think about product strategy, which was really cool.
That's cool. I want to talk about media empires and narrative control. One that comes to mind is A16Z. It feels like a VC firm that became a media company that like just happens to do VC, which is interesting.
I've never heard of A16Z.
Oh, you haven't? I'll send you the website after. Are there others? Are there other either venture firms or companies out there that you think have this pattern where it's kind of like they do media, but maybe they like monetize in a different way through it?
I think VC firms are always looking for a differentiator. So I think in short form video, Redpoint has done a really good job doing sort of these fun videos. Like if anyone wants to go look up, one of their partners, Logan Bartlett, was in a video where he just goes around New York saying that everything reminds him of when he first invested in Ramp, which is just like It's very funnily done. And it's like a way for them to do marketing, but also be sort of self-aware. So I think like Redpoint has innovated there. I think, Sequoia has done a good job of kind of showcasing founders that is mostly successful. They did get in a little trouble by doing a nice profile of Sam Bankman-Fried at one point.
Oh, wait. Can you go back to that? What happened there? So they were highlighting him as like the gem of their portfolio?
Yeah, they had these great kind of founder stories about all these CEOs in their portfolio. And when FTX imploded, they had one about SBF that then people were using to dunk on them. Back to our point about people sort of memifying things, I think that was where it came back to bite them. But overall, I think Sequoia does a good job of showcasing its founders. And then there are a lot of podcasts of emerging managers that I like that help them in a specific space. So like in AI, Sarah Guo and Elad Gil have a podcast that is pretty cool. I also want to shout out Alessio Finelli at Decibel has a cool podcast, Latent Space. So I do try to kind of follow these more niche things. And I think that being a micro influencer in an area these days can be valuable, aside from being like that huge fire hose that Andreessen is. And let's be like, Andreessen clearly wants to have their own huge media arm, and they'll probably be somewhat successful, or if not, they'll just try it again, but they have the resources to like keep at that. So
why do you think that is? Is it like they want narrative control over it, or what's going on there?
Well, I think they have, by assets under management, they're one of the largest firms with, many billions of dollars. They have a lot of success. They have personal platforms. And I think when you think about what they could always have more of, it's soft power, it's influence. And I think that when you have a media arm, you can be pushing for that soft power, that influence. Certainly, I think we're in a different landscape than when I started my career, where maybe you could credibly say that reporters had more influence in the public than individual investors. I think these days, a lot of VCs, you look at the All In podcast, a lot of these folks have way more public clout and way more fans than the reporters do. So it's kind of like, they might want to say they're the underdogs, but in a lot of ways, I think they're the new establishment. And it's the like reporters who are the ones who are sort of undergunned or sort of, overwhelmed in that sense. Yeah.
The New York Times, the daily podcast that I listened to, did this really fascinating interview with Andrew Schultz. He's a comedian, and they call him like a pod bro or something like that. But he's had like some high profile political interviews. I think he interviewed Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, a couple of others. And they were going back and forth like, do you feel like you have to have journalistic integrity to do this? And he's like, no, I'm just a comedian, blah, 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 blah. From the journalist's angle, how do you feel about people? I hope I'm not perceived in that way. My stuff's more evergreen. I guess me and you are kind of talking about events right now, but like, how do you feel about people who aren't traditionally from a journalistic background kind of stepping into the interview world?
Well, I think there are a lot of great creators in the tech world who are not journalists, and I really respect what they do, whether it's Molly O'Shea at Sorcery or it's the tech bros of TBPN. Like, they do a good job, and they clearly fit some sort of need in the market. I think what reporters are trained to do is really kind of press on things that are maybe uncomfortable or seize upon like a little thing that maybe was not the point of the interview, but suddenly becomes the most interesting thing. I feel like we've gone down some fun tangents. At least I hope they're fun for the audience. And that's to me the beauty of an interview. I think when you have folks who are not trained journalists, sometimes doing shows or whatever, they kind of just go down a list of questions and they don't really feel comfortable pushing back or going weird on a topic, and I think that it's that riffing that maybe takes practice and is the most fun. And so, occasionally I'll listen to one of these shows and I'll be like, oh, that was such an interesting answer. I hope they're going to follow up and go deeper on it or push back. And the person just kind of goes along to the next prepared question. And to me, there's just they're leaving a lot of meat on the bone, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And how I actually prepare for these podcasts is I'll have my assistant look up every other podcast a person has been on. So it sounds creepy to say, but I listened to 5 podcasts that you were on last night. And what I try to do in my questions is I wait for someone to ask a question. And then I say, I hope they ask this. And inevitably they don't. I write down what I wish they asked. And I hope that ends up being like a second form derivative way of asking questions that are like fascinating to other people.
That's incredible. You're putting in a lot of work. Not everyone has the time or the willingness to put in that work. And even some folks have great outsourced research, but because they're outsourcing it, they just don't have the comfort to really lean into the opportunity, you know?
Well, let's hit on that, because I mean that is kind of my competitive advantage now that like I'm doing it full time. I have taken that plunge. You have too. A lot of people are like, "Oh, so do you just throw in a chat GPT? Like, I'm having Alex on tomorrow. This is his website. Come up with questions." It's like, you could do that, but I honestly think the interview would suck if you didn't take the time to like truly get in the weeds with the person and feel them out.
I would agree. I think that you could use AI tools to get a baseline of someone's sort of early career or kind of as like a starting point. But I agree that ultimately you have to put in the work. I think so much of what we're doing in tech right now is looking for shortcuts, and shortcuts are called that for a reason, right? And it's like, I just think that you can optimize for efficiency at the loss of knowledge. And it seems like you're actually trying to pursue an understanding of your interviewer or interviewee. And that goes a long way. I think that, like, you know, if you had outsourced to the most amazing AI what questions to ask me, the AI probably could be asking the questions, right? Like we could replace both of us with our own AIs in that scenario.
How do we guard against that? In all seriousness,
the answer I've been giving is that I think the run the numbers, the upstarts audiences want a relationship with us.
Yeah.
They like CJ. They want to hear from CJ. They want to spend time with you. They're grateful that you put in that work. They can tell. They're like, oh, this was a more fun interview. Or maybe I liked that CFO a lot more. Like, oh, I can't wait for Intuit. But they have a relationship with you. And I think that's where the AI would not have the same sort of affinity, and they wouldn't be sort of along for the ride with us. And that's why I'm trying to have fun and be experimental with my articles with upstarts, because I want people to feel like they're actually getting a sense of me. Like my dog was in my most recent article. I want you to feel like I'm a real person and that I actually am thinking about these things. And then if any reader ever responds to me, I personally reply.
Yeah, I love that. And I think being human is a moat. Like, I don't know. I was talking to somebody once. It was a chef, and it was like, you know how people keep recipes like locked and guarded? It's like you have the recipe, but you don't have like the special know-how of how to like pull it all together. And I think part of that with any sort of content is the human element of it, sprinkling that in.
I would agree. And I got a great lesson from a very successful podcaster when I was asking about, you know, maybe launching my own podcast eventually. And they said that, you know, they found that at a certain level, their audience numbers didn't super change when they had like a famous name or not on, because it was actually them that the audience was like, I'm going to spend my commute with this person. And I just trust that whoever they talk to, it's going to be a fun time. To me, that's the goal. Like that is, if I launch a podcast, that'll be the dream, that people just want to spend some time with Alex, you know, trust that it'll be a good conversation. And I really hope that for your audience, we're living up to that as well.
Someone gave me the exact same advice. And like, I think back, it was 2 years ago. I think back on it all the time. Like, at what point do you get to that you can just put a mic up and talk and they'll come and just listen to you at the same cadence? Because you're building a relationship with them. And then like, I definitely look at my guests as the primary concentration, but it's kind of like I turn on Bill Simmons regardless of who's there. Whereas other podcasts, I'll scroll through and be like, who is the guest first?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're on your way, and then I'll someday maybe try to earn that too. But I do think that is the future against the AI, is the sense of a relationship and sort of an affinity with an actual person.
What I have been trying to piece together, though, is how discovery impacts both of our businesses. I got really pissed on Substack the other day and wrote this note. Like, this is kind of fucked up. Like, I'm getting one box by Gemini, and Gemini's using my own content to synthesize and then play back to somebody, like, without a link. It's like this ogre just came in and is like front running me with my own content.
Well, the good news is Gemini sucks, because in my article today, I was joking about how I've posted on social media that my dog is my first employee. And when I put in my dog's name and my name on Google, the AI top result confirmed my dog was my first employee.
No way.
Based on my social media posts. Yes. So it's very easily gameable. It's not fully trustable. And I think like it's frustrating, but I think that we just have to hope that folks are coming directly to us and they're not like, Google search used to be a huge source of traffic for traditional media companies. And I think that for us, the reality is this can be very different, where audiences are going to feel the direct affinity with us. They're going to be finding us maybe in other ways. But like the days of just Googling Intuit CFO interview and, oh, here's CJ, like we definitely can't assume that that'll be there.
Part of me was frustrated and part of me was actually thankful because like you came into this with an established name in media. I was a CFO at a company people hadn't heard of before. And like, I hadn't been working in media. So like, I thought like if I had to build this all over again, like, I don't know if I could have done it in this environment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you would have faced a bigger challenge, but I would have bet on your hustle and quality to find some way. I mean, if you look at this VC I mentioned, Molly O'Shea, who's kind of built like a marketing, a whole moment where like companies are announcing funding partly through her and stuff. I don't think anyone knew her name a few years ago. You know, she's pretty young, but she's just very aggressively built her name in a rapid time. And I think people will always be like that, regardless of what the medium is. You know, we'll always see these hustlers succeed.
Yeah, I think the people that hustle and put out genuine content and then overlay the human element to it, like I put memes and GIFs in there because I think it's funny, and it's also like part of the competitive moat that like you're not going to out weird me in a way.
If you're not having fun, no one else will. I think this is the thing. Too many people are not having fun. Like you're having fun yourself, and that bleeds over to your audience where some of them have fun too.
Yeah, I was writing about the state of IPOs the other day, and then I took a detour to shit on my HOA and how they keep telling me to bring in my yellow bench and that my neighbors are telling on me. It's like, who would put that in? I'm like, I don't know, but it makes me laugh and it makes me keep showing up to write every day.
I'll put little like dad jokes and puns in my articles just to make myself laugh. And then occasionally a reader will see it and feel like I threw it in just for them. So it's like a win-win. Like, why wouldn't I be corny, you know?
In all seriousness, though, if you think about like the hierarchy of like types of content, do you think that like time sensitivity or news is becoming more valuable with AI now?
Well, I think it's important, but it's commoditized.
Say more.
Breaking news still has value, and you can still go viral, you know, announcing that someone switched AI jobs, or that, you know, there's a big acquisition that just happened, something like that. Asymmetrical information still has a lot of value. I think how you win the asymmetrical information game is harder than ever, and it's a bit of an arms race. And like, you know, most of the folks writing about a topic will lose. Like, someone catches the wave, everyone else, it's like, thanks for playing. Yeah. And so that's a game that I do not miss at all. But I do think that, you know, there's a reason that a brand like The Information has been very successful pursuing a scoops strategy. I think that in the age of AI, what I'm going for is what we just talked about, which is the more relationship-based kind of deep dive curated route, where it's sort of like, I don't need to necessarily read this article, but I feel confident that I'll enjoy it. It'll teach me something. It'll help me in how I work. And so it'll be a fun, positive experience to read this story. That's kind of the brain receptors I want going versus the, oh crap, like I need to know this breaking news, because I feel like that is what Perplexity could deliver us over time.
And I've never wanted to compete on who's first, but I have wanted to compete on who's most enjoyable and also can make me better at my job so I can make more money. Like, that's been my North Star.
100%. For me, my mottos are trustworthy and fun. I want every piece I do to do both. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're competing just on like who's first, like that's a hard game to play.
Totally.
What about LinkedIn, Facebook, and Google? Like, we touched on Google a bit here, but like it kind of felt like once critical mass was built, that they shut the gates. Both of us are on Substack. I hope that never becomes the case. I love Substack. I'm like a big fanboy, and they've been so nice to me as like I've started to build my company. How do you think about your relationship with platforms and also like being on Substack?
I think that Substack is overall a good partner to have, but I think that it's hard to ever have a platform care as much about every creator on it as the creator cares about their own work. So that just makes sense, right? Like how could they? And so there's always more that I wish Substack could be doing to promote all of us and help their own business by extension. But I'm very empathetic that they have like a product roadmap and they have people who are way more successful and bigger than me who are probably annoying them every day. And so it's sort of like, realistically, I'm happy with what I get, but I could always be pushing for more. And I think that these days we're looking for platforms that offer some flexibility and some empathy, and you don't really expect like 100%. Like LinkedIn has been really good distribution for me, but it drives me nuts. Just for starters, the notifications make the site like almost impossible to track. Like, I don't know if you look at your notifications when you post something, but it's like, CJ's friend liked his comment on your post. And I'm like, great, how is that relevant to me? And wading through those can feel like a full-time job. But like that said, I post a lot more on LinkedIn now, and if anyone from LinkedIn is listening or watching, like,
please like my post.
Yeah.
It's so true. Whenever I log on to LinkedIn, it always says plus 20 notifications, no matter what, even if I didn't do anything. And I swear maybe like one in there is like worth clicking on.
Right. And then I've tried to go into the settings and change that. And it's like, oh, you don't want any notifications? I'm like, no,
I didn't say that.
I want the relevant ones. So they're like, well, that's ridiculous.
Sir, that's a step too far. That's funny. I want to gear towards a close and just talk about the irony that both me and you are running businesses that kind of are piggybacking or digging into the venture-backed economy and world, but like our businesses ourselves, at least from my perspective, I don't think I'm running a venture-backable business. Do you ever think of the irony of that?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple of funny things there. First, just for fun, when I did quit my job at Forbes to start Upstarts, I put on LinkedIn, like working on something new and like stealth startup and all that stuff. And I did get all the VC associates, like, using some sort of automation, just like messaging me, being like, would love to hear about your new business and how we might be able to invest. And like
seriously?
All of that. Oh yeah. Like people have done tests just for fun where they create like fake accounts just to see like how they get swarmed. So like, there was plenty of that. And I did meet with a few VCs where I was just looking for reader feedback. And they were like, I don't get it. Like, where are you building the software that I can invest in?
Right.
And I was like, oh, there is no software.
Where's
and they
the
were
data center?
Yeah. They're like, oh, so you're making tools for other creators. I was like, no. I'm the creator right now.
I'm writing shit.
Yeah. And they're like, what? You should make software for that. And to be clear, I like Dan Schipper and the Every team. They were trying to do both, where they actually write and do software tools. And Reid Hoffman invested in them. So good for them. But for me, it was very much like, I want to make this successful just for myself and build a sustainable business. I do think that we're in a moment in tech, though, where folks respect profitable, bootstrapped, lean startups. And so I feel like it's never been easier to like make that case or make that pitch. I think even a few years ago, this would have been called a lifestyle business. But now people see like we're creators, we're working crazy hard. We are building brands like from the basement up, floor by floor, and it's all us. And I think there's a lot of respect for that. So I at least feel like a lot of support from the community. I hope you do too. And like that was something that I thought would happen pre-launch that never did, that people would be like, oh, this isn't ambitious enough because you didn't raise a lot of venture dollars, It's
something I've honestly had to interrogate in myself, because my whole career was built on raising money, acquiring companies, and selling companies. Like that's literally what I've done in the last, 10, 15 years. And the whole goal was to essentially get something to a point where instead of like making a little bit of money over time, you make a whole whack of cash at once. It's kind of like the Silicon Valley meme. I love that show with Russ Hanneman. He's like, no, I don't want to make a little bit of money. I want to make nothing for a long time, then a fuck ton of money all at once.
Yeah.
And like that was the whole goal.
The iconic, like, what are you doing making revenue? You want to stay pre-revenue as long as possible. When
Once
you're pre-revenue, you can be anything. Yeah. I love that. I actually enjoyed being pre-revenue for a minute as well, but making money is good too. It does seem like that is the Silicon Valley mantra, because you're building, ideally very like repeatable recurring revenue, and like you want to be sort of getting a flywheel going. But I feel like in the AI world, revenue can mean anything, and like repeatability is overrated. And so I think like I think we're just in a much more chaotic landscape where making money now has value, is respected. And if you're ever talking to a VC, CJ, you should just be like, oh, well, I haven't raised money yet. We're not looking to do any acquisitions yet. And they're just like, oh.
It's funny because they want what they can't have, right?
100%. Yeah.
I was talking to someone who has a community-centric business, right, for professionals. And he was saying he took on money, and it was during the zero interest rate phenomenon days. And it was personally very good for him. He doesn't regret that. But he's like, I think it was like the jig is up. Like, we knew that wasn't a great idea. And I've been trying to claw my way back to the quality of what it was. And he's like, if I had advice for you, man, like look at your willingness to compound and do this every day and not try to double it every year, like as your moat, like your willingness to use time to your advantage. And it hit me in a way that I had never thought about, like running a tech company, for example.
Yeah. I got advice from a CEO of like a agency, slightly different model, but
services based.
More services based business. And they were like, a year in and 2 years in each year, you will be X% more efficient at doing what you do. And it's up to you whether you want to reinvest that time in something else or reinvest it back in the business and try to make even more money, but like you will inevitably get more efficient at what you do. Like this is the dumbest you will ever be. And I really appreciated that. Like I take it to heart,
and then you step back, you're like, oh, so like after Substack fees or whatever else you factor in, like everybody would love to run like in the tech world an 85%, not gross profit business, but like profit margin business. And then you can pay yourself. So I've always taken like umbrage with the term lifestyle business because I think it implies like either you don't care as much or you're not trying as hard.
Yeah, I think everyone still is like mentally in 2010 where it's like some graphic designer who used to work at Google, like working from the beach, like 3 days
in Costa Rica.
Yeah, and that is not what it means now. It means we work 7 days a week and like we are squirreling away the money we make because you never know what happens the next day. And so I completely agree. We need a new term for this.
That's what I say to my wife all the time. And she's like, what do you? She's like, why are you always so nervous about this? I'm like, look at MC Hammer. It could all go away. Alex, this has been incredible. Where can people find you? I'm a huge fan of Upstarts. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, so it's free to subscribe, upstartsmedia.com. One article every week, fully free, thanks to sponsors. So you never have to give me your credit card. You can subscribe for extra articles if you do like what we're doing. And then on social media, I'm at Alex R. Konrad on all social media. And Upstarts is all over. You can Google it, and maybe the AI search results will give you a 50-50 chance of finding me.
Don't use Google. Screw them. Use Bing.
Yeah, well, use Bing, use Perplexity, whatever you want, whichever one is sponsoring CJ when this comes out.
Hell yeah. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, CJ. This was great.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.